Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Getting Into TV, a series that I hope helps those people starting out and wanting to make their first steps in the world of TV. This week I'm joined by Matt Clark, who's going to teach me everything there is to know about being an edit assistant and also tell me a bit about what it's like to use Avid. So without any further ado, let's begin.
Hi Matt, thank you for joining. Obviously we're going to be talking about an edit assistant role today. What was your journey like getting into TV?
Thanks for having me. Well, I mean, I had a slightly kind of like not a typical journey into TV.
I feel like it's the best story when it's not typical.
Yeah, I mean, straight out of uni, like I was working full time at John Lewis. Like I was fully prepared to be there for a year just to like live and pay rent and stuff. And my tutor, my old tutor from university, she left at the same time as we did, and she went to set up a new uni with her and just like literally 3 members of staff, so really, really tiny. And she needed someone to come and teach her new students how to use Avid. So she just asked me, I just got a random email while I was sat at a till saying, Matt, can you come and teach my students how to use Avid? Just do a session.
Nice.
Yeah, sure, great. Because at that point I hadn't touched it for months, and I was like, just anything to get back onto it. So I did that, and then I did another one, and then that day she was there was a Bristol Creative Industries networking event that we were partnering with her university, Boom Satsuma. So I went along to that, and she put a kind of like an edit assistant sticker on me, even though I wasn't, and I didn't do that. And she was so great, and she just introduced me to loads of people. And then I got talking to a talent manager who she said that they didn't have any edit assistant roles, but she knew of someone who did. So she passed my email and CV across to them. And then I went home for a week. I had a week off work. I went home to see my mum, and I was going to get a car because I was sick of getting the bus in Bristol.
Yeah.
And then like the Tuesday of that week, I got a random email from RDF West saying, "Hi Matt, we've had your details passed on to us. Fancy a Zoom call?"
I love it.
And I was like, yes, absolutely. So yeah, and I had the Zoom call, and funnily enough, the technical manager at RDF was also taught by my tutor years and years ago.
It's a small world, isn't it? It's quite scary.
It is a very, very small world. Yeah.
What I like about that story is it basically shows you how important networking is, and I hate the fact that that's basically the truth, because I hate networking. It's my least favorite thing. I went to an event, and it was cool to be there, but I felt so anxious. But I was like, no, you've got to go and do this. So anyone watching, make yourself go network, because clearly it works.
Yeah, it is honestly the only way to do it, because when you're just a name on a sheet of paper, like that doesn't mean anything. And like, admittedly, I'm a certified user of Avid as well. I did a course while I was at uni, so that also is a big part of why I got the job, and is why my CV got an actual look at. But yeah, I mean, so that looks good, but when you're just a name on a bit of paper, other than that, like it's actually going and meeting these people that suddenly they're like, oh, he seems nice.
You mentioned about the course you did at uni. Is that something that like your uni did specifically, or is that something that you can kind of do yourself? Like, what would you recommend doing that for someone that wanted to become an edit assistant?
So, I mean, it's definitely not like a you need to have it if you're going to be an edit assistant. I've only been working in TV for a year, and I've not met anyone else that's also got it, other than the people that I knew who also did the course. So I wouldn't say it's a necessity, but certainly for me, like, because I didn't go, and I wasn't a runner. I haven't worked at a post house. I literally went straight into freelance edit assisting. And it was because I had such a grounded knowledge of the software.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is the official kind of Avid certification course. So my uni ran it because they're a learning partner with Avid. I think there's quite a lot of unis that do it now.
Okay.
And you get it. In fact, I got to do it for free because we were doing it over COVID. So the teaching capacity was very limited. So the uni swallowed the cost, which was very, very good of them actually. But outside of outside of a learning partner is like thousands of pounds. It's quite an expensive course. It's one of those things that like if you want to be an edit assistant, like make Avid your friend and suddenly you'll get on with it and you'll be fine. But like there are so many days where it just doesn't want to play ball and it's just a pain in the ass. But it is the best tool for the job. Like,
so I suppose we should actually talk about what it is you do as an edit assistant. What is an edit assistant? What do you do on the day to day?
so my main job is basically getting all the footage in for the editors. That's kind of like the big thing. That is my job. The rushes land on my desk and I ingest them all and sync them all up and do all of like two big complicated sync maps of like all the different cameras and the different audio tracks and get them all to like groups so the editors can just flick through them and don't have to worry about any of that. And I also do edit assistants also do a lot of like playouts, just like exports for the directors and the execs. Most of the time it is just kind of like you're an ingest monkey.
You say it's just ingesting, but it is such an integral part because without you, that footage won't get anywhere. And if you mess it up or if you put it in the wrong place, like it is quite an important job, to be fair.
It's a really important job, and especially because the thing is that there's not really like, especially like a lot of companies, there's no like junior edit assistant thing. Like there's no real opportunity for like proper training unless, well, like obviously I knew how to use Avid, but like that doesn't mean I know how to be an edit assistant. And I was really lucky that, so I went to work on Dickinson's Real Deal.
I know so many people, having worked on Bargain Hunt, I know so many people that have gone to that show.
They had an in-house technical assistant. Well, she was called a technical assistant or technician, but she was doing an edit assistant's job. And she taught me how to do it, like everything. Taught me how to be an edit assistant. And she even taught me things that we weren't doing on Dicko's, but she knew that I would need to know going on to other shows because of just how a Dickinson's does certain things that are not typical for other shows, like sync maps, for example.
Pretend I have no idea what a sync map is, and someone that wants to go into edit assistant, what is a sync map?
So a sync map is essentially you take your whole day's worth of footage, all your cameras, all your sound, and you put it all on a timeline, kind of like on different layers. So you have all of camera A on track 1 and all of camera B on track 2, and all the sound and all the camera sound underneath. And you're basically, the operative word is should. If the time code has been shot with time of day, so that if you're shooting at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the time code should say 13 hours. It should all just marry, and then you basically just have to go and like chop it up and just bring it into the like if they've shot once like an interview in the morning and then they've done a bit of like actuality in the afternoon and then they've done another interview in the evening. It's like you section it out into those chunks. And that's basically what it is. And then obviously when it's not in sync, you just have to like shuffle it back and forth. It's not really a thing in drama because most of the time in drama, obviously you've got scenes and takes and the audio is properly recorded and the video is properly recorded. So you just sync the individual clip rather than like a whole day. And then it's kind of like working in reverse. But like working on unscripted or like doc stuff at uni, you just film straight to the camera and you just have sound. Like you don't do separate sound.
How do you become an edit assistant? Like, what's your team like with at your work? Is it just you and yourself in one room, or is there a few of you?
The setup at my current place is it is literally just me that does all of the ingest and all of the playouts for the editors. There's my boss as well, the technical manager. He's very good at helping out and making sure that I'm supported. If I'm feeling like I'm drowning and if I've got directors and editors asking, where's my footage? I just have to say, like, give me some space. And he goes and kind of like bats them down. So I feel very supported, but yeah, it is just me.
Sorry, just butting in. I thought this might be a really good time to mention the Screen Skills website. They have some really useful resources, such as these career maps. For instance, this is the post-production one, since we're talking about the edit assistant. You can see exactly what roles there are, who reports to who, and how the whole thing kind of comes to be. But if you actually go on to Screen Skills, you can type in any job role that is on this map and any other map as well, and you can learn so much more about that role, what they do. You can see more interviews like this, a day in the life of, and you can also see what entry level qualifications or what training opportunities there are available for that role, I'd really recommend Screen Skills.
Offline and online, I get it, but I've never really asked anyone what they mean. What is an offline and online edit?
So an offline edit is the creative bit. It's the bit where you're actually building the show. Most editors that you encounter are offline editors. I would kind of class myself as an offline edit assistant, because it's all like to do with it's where the show's being made. It's but I suppose the offline part of it is stemmed from the fact that we use proxies, like video proxies, to edit with, so much lower res versions that Avid can deal with, and it's not going to crash every 2 minutes. Not that it doesn't, but yeah.
Avid always crashes, I feel like, on every single show.
Yeah. It's like, pray to the Avid gods, what are you going to sacrifice today? Offline's the creative bit. It's where you have the editor and the director working. And then the online is basically when you've reached picture lock and the sequence isn't going to move anymore. And then, so the online is basically, it's like the final post. It's where the color grade gets put in, and it's where it gets what's called conformed back to the high res, like, camera footage. If your show was shot in 4K, you'll edit in HD probably, and then when it gets onlined, it'll go back to 4K.
What is the natural life cycle of an edit from when the rushes come to you through to the end? What is that life cycle like?
So when the rushes land on my desk, I ingest them. That probably takes, usually if it's a couple of terabytes of stuff, that will take overnight to ingest on a couple of computers. And then in the morning, then I'll sync that. The editor has probably started at that time and is like, where's my rushes? Where's my rushes? They're all really lovely, but they're like, where's my rushes? So they get their rushes. Often with interviews, we'll do like tiny little exports to send off to get transcribed, so that the directors have got transcripts of their interviews. Often that's just done through an automatic service. So on our show, I think the edits are like 10 weeks of actual editing.
Is that 10 weeks for one episode?
Yes. Yeah. So one show gets 10 weeks, but it's more like kind of 13 weeks because they have down weeks while the channel's feeding back. And then we have what's called these like milestones. So they'll be cutting for like 6-7 weeks before it gets sent to the channel. And then we do like an official rough cut, and that goes to the channel, and I'm the one that has to do all of that. So like, and it varies on like the broadcast that you're working with, but National Geographic, which is who I'm working for at the moment, they have very specific settings. Like their stuff has to be a certain like codec and size, and it's really specific. So they do rough cut, and then they'll be down for a week while the channel feeds back, and then they'll be cutting for a few more weeks, and sometimes they'll do like a rough cut 2, or they'll go straight to fine cut 1. It kind of, on the first 6 we did 2 rough cuts and 1 fine cut, and then on this 6 we've done 1 rough cut and 2 fine cuts. I don't know why, it's not to do with me, but like rough cut 2 was like really soon after rough cut 1. But basically it's kind of like the channel gets it 4 times. So rough cut, fine cut 1, fine cut 2, picture lock. And as soon as that first rough cut hits, suddenly it feels like it all speeds up. Like suddenly it will be fine cut 2 time, and you'll be like, oh, you'll go in a week, like, because then the picture lock, they only get like 4 days to do the picture lock, because at that point the channel has got very few notes.
I don't know about your role, but I know that editing can consume someone's life, really. It's not just a straightforward 9 till 5, or from what I've seen anyway.
Absolutely. I mean, it's more like a 9 till 9 or an 8 till 8. Like, so we're using like a cloud system to do our edits. So like the computers are kind of virtual, so they have like set hours about when they're on and off. But we can make them like, they could be on all the time if we wanted, but they don't need to be. But like, one of our editors, who I absolutely adore, she is an early bird, so she likes to start at like 6 a.m. and then she'll have it off at like 6, and then she's like, I want my evening to myself.
This will be perfect time to ask you, what skills do you need to have as an assistant? Because I mean, it's quite technical, and obviously, I feel like you've got to love what you do to be an edit assistant, and also to be an editor. What skills do you need?
Well, yeah. So I mean, being an edit assistant is very different to being an editor. Like it's a much more technical role. I mean, an editor really, like, it's the storytelling part that matters. They just need to know how to press the buttons so that they can tell the story. Whereas me, it's much more about like pressing the buttons and knowing why they do certain things, so that when things go wrong, I can go and problem solve. So yeah, it's about is having good problem solving skills is a really like important thing, but also I would say like the number one thing is attention to detail.
Yeah.
Like being able to spot when someone's out of sync. Like sometimes it's really obvious because they're really out of sync, but if they're like a couple of frames out of sync, and like it's always really important not to use like Bluetooth headphones,
Yeah.
because Bluetooth has a delay as well. So
I've learned that.
I know. It's like I've got AirPods and I love them, but I can't use them when I'm syncing because I have to use overhead ones and I hate them.
Yeah.
But it's like noticing things like that where it's like it's a couple of frames out, or if you spelled something wrong, or like little things like that. And especially like on my show, it's a lot of archive. So we have an archive producer. So she's amazing. She gathers all this archive footage and sends it to me, and I ingest it all. But it's like little things like that where we like check each other's work, where like she might have not sent, like, because she uploads it all to like SharePoint and then I download it again, because she's also remote. So it's like things like if one clip has failed to upload or something, it's like, and like sometimes these like bins of clips that she'll send to like hundreds, and I like got to go through, and we've got this huge spreadsheet that's got all the information you could possibly need to know about the rights of this clip and where it's come from and all of that, and like all the keywords so the editors can just search for like coast or sea or something like that.
I want that document, because that document would make my life so much easier.
It's glorious. It's most of the time being an edit assistant is bartending, like progress bartending.
I like that.
Like, because you do. I mean, on Friday evening, like this Friday just gone, I was done by like 5:10, and I probably could have just gone home, but I was waiting for an export to finish.
Obviously, your way into TV was not conventional, let's say. How do you become an edit assistant? What would you say is the normal way, or the way that the way that other people could potentially do it?
Yeah, so I guess the biggest, like the most common way is through a post-production house. So often you'll go in as a runner, just a post-production runner, which is what you did, I think.
That's what I did. And to be fair, being a post-production runner, when I was in uni, I didn't take much interest in the post-production side, so I didn't really know about it. But when I was actually working there, I learned so much. Like the people in the post-production house were so eager to help, like teach me how to use an Avid, or to just kind of show me the basics. And then what was also nice about working there is pre-COVID, you'd have all the clients, you'd have the directors and everyone that you could talk to. So to be fair, it was probably the best place I could have started. There were so many people to talk to.
Yeah, I mean, that is the thing about a post house. I mean, I've literally never even been inside one. But it just like, I think especially, I mean, obviously people on production of this must be the same as well, but it feels like especially in post, there are so many people that are so keen to help others jump up, because it's so difficult to get, like, there is, like I was saying earlier, there is no junior role to being an edit assistant really, especially not when you're the only one on a production, and it's such a lot of pressure, so that when, like, you can't just give that role to someone completely entry level, because they won't cope, because it's such a hard job and there's such a lot of pressure, and you have to, like, you could only do that if you were in a team of people.
I think it's not just like technically difficult and technically challenging. I think it's challenging, like dealing with people. You've got to deal with people, and I think that's the same. I think that's what kind of is difficult about every job in TV. It is just looking after people and helping them.
Yeah, and I think, but yeah, especially in edit assisting, is that I think it's the responsibility side of it, like more than the technical problems. Like we all wanted to cry because Avid is not playing ball, and you just don't know how to fix it, and you spent 3 hours looking on the forums trying to work out why it's giving you certain error message. But it's the responsibility of, if I screw this export up, or if I forget to send it to someone, that could mean that the executive at National Geographic doesn't see the cut, and that's a big deal.
That is a pretty big pressure to have on your shoulders.
Just kind of not to think about it. Like,
Sorry for making you think about it.
I just hit the export button and upload it to a portal, and what happens after that is nothing to do with me.
I remember when I was having to the show that I was like kind of edit assistant tech running, really is what I was doing, but I was having to export all the programs and send it to the execs, and that first week when I was on my own, I was absolutely terrified, because I was just like, I really want to make sure that the people are getting this, like whoever at the BBC wants this, I hope they get it. But I hated it. I just go home constantly checking my emails, being like, just in case someone contacts me, but I haven't got this. Obviously, you said the best way to get into Edit Assistant is through post-production house and running. What would you say once you are an Edit Assistant, once you've got there, what's the job progression like? Well, where do you want to go?
Well, I mean, I think I want to be an editor. Like in drama, you can be like an edit trainee, and then you jump up to second assistant editor, and then you're first assistant editor, and that's like quite a clear progression. And then if you're a first, some people stay as firsts, and they would just be like a career first assistant editor, because it's a very well paid job. It's high responsibility, and it's a good job. And then some firsts will go on to be editors, but that's drama. That kind of like progression of like tiers of assistants just doesn't really exist in unscripted. So it is literally, I mean, it's some people, like we did have a junior edit assistant, and some companies do have like senior edit assistants, but most of them don't. It's just kind of like you're an edit assistant, and then eventually you might get to be a junior editor. That's kind of like the next step for a lot of people. Or you'll have been an edit assistant for long enough, or on a show like Dickinson's, you'll have done it every year for so long, and eventually they'll be stuck for an editor, and they'll be like, hey, do you want to cut an episode? And that's exactly how two of the editors that I was closest with on Dickinson's became editors.
Yeah,
because they were edit assistants for so long.
I was saying this to one of the runners on my last job, just about stepping up. And I always think that it's always better when you're at the start of your career anyway, it's always easier and it's always better to kind of step up on something that because you get it and you have that basic understanding and knowledge of it. And then you can step up, and then that's when you can kind of expand your wings a bit.
Yeah, I think also, especially for like really formatted shows like Dickinson's and Bargain Hunt, like you know the format so well, because I mean, by the time I was only there for 3 months, but by the time that I was finishing Dicko's, they were getting me and Beth to cut stuff for them, just because they were so under the gun, because they have like 5 days to cut an episode.
Yeah, I mean, if it's anything, I can imagine it's exactly the same as what theirs was.
It's such a tight turnaround. When you think about my show now, where they get 10 weeks to edit one show, and suddenly it's so different. But it's like, oh, Matt, could you just cut down this deal for me? Or like, I've cut down most of this deal. Can you just put the cutaways on for me? And then while they're like doing the more editing-y bits, where they're doing the like top of shows and end of shows and part breaks and stuff like that. So that's like a really good way of like, and like if an editor's asking you to do that, it's like that's a good sign, because it means that they trust you to do that. The other kind of like pathway after being an edit assistant is to go into like the online final post side of it.
Mm-hmm.
So like to go into what's called online editing, which is basically like where you like finish the show, like put the final graphics on, like the final titles or captions or whatever. And especially on shows like Dickinson's, and I imagine Bargain Hunt as well, we don't have like a specific color grader like you would on a drama or on a lot of docs, where your colorist is someone different to your online editor. Like on like daytime shows, that's the same person. Like they do what's called like a speed grade.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the kind of like the other side of it. And like there's a lot of edit assistants that get into like the really technical like workflowy side of things.
Yeah.
So like they'll go into like technical managing, so they'll like manage the post-production department of a production company. So yeah, there is lots of different pathways, but it's not just like if you're an edit assistant you have to be an editor, because some people are so technical that like that's the bit about it that they enjoy. They're not really interested in the storytelling part of it. And like certainly like I'm interested in both, but like how I got into it certainly is because I was like so geeky about Avid.
Going back, actually, just before I go on to this next question, do you think to become an edit assistant or to go into post, you need to have gone to uni? Is that something that you need, or do you need to just have that understanding? You just need to have that passion, I suppose, for storytelling and for editing.
Yeah, no, I absolutely don't think you need to go to uni to work in TV at all.
I think it's just some, to me, and this is why I say to everyone, I feel like it's just somewhere where you can play and find your feet.
Yeah, I definitely, and like for me, it was so I could move across the country. Like back where I was living at home, there's no TV at all. I mean, home is not that far away from London, but like it's far enough away that it just like London's so overwhelming and daunting that like certainly to not go to university, and especially straight out of sixth form, like I'm a completely different person to who I was when I was 18. So like going to uni and like having to live by yourself and be in a brand new city, like that's the part of uni that's like important. But then even to be honest, even after uni, like I felt that within the 6 months I was working at John Lewis, that changed me even more, because to just like have to deal with like customers like that changes you so much. So yeah, no, you don't need to go to uni. I mean, certainly for me, like other than moving, the most useful thing I got out of uni was doing that certification. And so if you think that you want to go into post, like having like this new degree that my old tutors set up at Boom Satsuma, they make them cut on Avid from like day one. Like
That's
occasionally they'll use Premiere or like After Effects or Resolve, but cutting certainly like as they get more and more through it, and now that they've got a bigger team and like their new head of post is set up as a co-set up one of the post-production houses in Bristol. So he's like, like really head in the game. It's that whole degree is about like gearing people towards working in production.
What is there out there where people could get the skills and could like gain without having to spend thousands of pounds? Where could people go?
So it's interesting you say that, because literally I think a few years ago there was nothing really you could do. Like there's a few YouTube channels out there that are really good for teaching like basic skills on how to use Avid. But in the last like 2 months, there's someone called the Avid assistant who's an assistant editor on dramas, I think. And he does really, really good videos on just like, this is how you be an assistant editor. And I can only imagine that the stuff he's going to do in the future is like going to be so useful for teaching people how to use it. There's what's called Media Composer First, which is, I mean, it's all right for learning like the basics. I would say if you're really serious about it, what would be better is to think, right, I'm going to use my 30-day free trial and have the full blown. Yeah. Because even the first version needs a powerful computer. It's just a stripped down lockdown version of Avid. That's all it is. You'd be better off doing the 30-day free trial and just going ham at it and really trying to learn it. I think. But there's a few like courses out there. Like there's like a master the workflow one for assistant editors, and there's also the Grierson Doc Lab one. I think that's just run like recently.
Just before I end, where would you go to apply for jobs? Do you apply for things, or is it just a case that you kind of word of mouth, or do you go to certain websites?
Facebook, to be honest. There's a really, really great Facebook page called I Need an Edit Assistant. And I think you have to be an edit assistant to get in it. So it's slightly difficult to get in, like, because I think they want serious applications from people that they don't have to like train. But that's where like there's so many jobs on there, and it's a countrywide one, so it's sometimes like you'll see a really good job and then you'll like be scrolling down trying to find like where it is, and then it's like Manchester.
Yeah,
like, well,
so many of my dream jobs I've seen, I'm just like, I don't live there, and they say you can't travel, and I'm like, oh, this is like my dream.
I know, it's such a, yeah, it's going. There's so like honestly the number of jobs that I see that I'm like, oh, I'd love to do that, and it's like London. It's like,
And thank you so much for talking to me.
oh.
And hopefully, people watching or listening eventually will be able to become an edit assistant, or at least have an understanding of what they need to do and to get there. So yeah, thank you so much for chatting to me today.
Thank you so much for watching. If you want to find out more, then I can't recommend Screen Skills job page enough. It has so much information if that's the route that you think you want to go down. If you're watching this before Christmas, then I hope you have the best holiday ever. I will be back in January, and I'll be releasing videos every 2 weeks rather than every month. The first one will be how to be a third AD in drama, which will be released in early January. Make sure you leave a like, comment and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you very soon.